Both the Republican and Democratic-backed spending cuts failed to pass in the Senate today, with 10 Democrats voting against their own party's proposal. And with the clock ticking toward the threat of a government shutdown on March 18th, that's next Friday, lawmakers scrambled to keep Washington afloat. Meanwhile, the country is still going broke from overspending, entitlements, rising gas and food prices. So how do we stop the bleeding? Steve Moore, senior economic writer for the Wall Street Journal. Yaron Brook, president of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. And Eric Bolling, host of Follow the Money, and my good buddy and my colleague on the Fox Business Network. Eric, to you first. Do you think the Republicans in the House cave, vote to raise the debt ceiling, vote to let the government borrow more money, give the president some kind of credibility, which he probably doesn't deserve?
Yeah, absolutely. Well put, Judge. He doesn't deserve it. Yeah, I think they're going to do this. I think they're going to, like you pointed out earlier, guess what? They're going to go maybe not 2 years for 2 weeks for a continuing resolution. They may go 4. They may go 6. Big smokescreen, Judge. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about cutting $61 billion or $31 billion. Can I just do this? May I do this quickly, Judge? I know you know they have a lot of time.
Don't tell me I have another gimmick.
Here's a $100 bill, right? Yaron, will you hold that for me?
Absolutely.
Here's 100. That's the national debt that you just showed earlier in the show.
Right.
Here's what they want to cut, Judge, right there. That's if the Republicans get their way. 43 cents on a $100 bill.
All right.
It's a joke.
Does anybody in the Republican Party, aside from the real small government folks like Ron Paul, Rand Paul, we just had Alan West and Connie Mack on, take the debt seriously?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm disappointed even in Paul Ryan, who I thought was much more radical than he turned out to be.
You're talking about the chair of the House Budget Committee and a member of the Republican leadership and a so-called fiscal hawk.
That's what they said. And then his initial proposal was $30 billion. It wasn't even the nickel here. It was half a nickel. And then he comes back with $60 billion on a $1.7 trillion deficit, $3.7 trillion budget.
Steve Moore, how close are we to serious inflation? Are things like food, gasoline, and beer, of all things, starting to go up? And if so, why?
Yeah, well, look, with reference to this budget crisis, because I think it all ties in, Judge, I think what you've got going on is people have to realize this is not a fire alarm we're talking about. This is a real financial crisis as a result of this enormous debt. And this idea that we can't cut $50 or $60 billion out of this debt, that's 2 days of federal government spending. So it's trivial. Now, here's the point. When you talk about these price increases, we are starting to see the specter of rising prices. We see it in airline prices. We see it obviously at the gas pump with 30-cent increases just in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
My goodness, Judge, a box of Cheerios now costs $3.50.
Right.
And this is putting a squeeze on middle-class families because you know what? Wages aren't rising, so it means that every time prices go up, it's like a hidden tax increase on the American family.
Eric, I want to go to your expertise, which is not beer, it's oil.
Well, it may be
It's oil. Did oil flatten out a little bit today? Because it looks like Gaddafi's winning. Give me a little background.
Judge, here's what's going on. When this whole Middle Eastern turmoil started, oil was around $86 a barrel. At 104 today, down from 105, it's skyrocketing. Also, what we don't see on the gas pump, you see the national average, that AAA number, 352, 353. Throw that out. Oil prices, gasoline prices on the world oil markets have skyrocketed. There's another 30 or 40 cents per gallon baked in
how
already.
responsible is the Federal Reserve for all this?
Oh, hugely responsible. That was the point I was going to make. It's not just Libya. We are printing money like there's no tomorrow. Have been for 2 or 3 years now. This is a monetary inflation. When you flood the markets with the amount of money that we're flooding the markets with, and if banks start lending money, as everybody's urging them to do, lend money, inflation could spiral out of control here.
Why doesn't Ben Bernanke and why don't the big government people in both parties understand this, Steve Moore? I mean, this is really basically economics 101. There's no, as Ronald Reagan would say, there's no rocket science to this.
This ain't rocket science. And by the way, I wish I were as rich as Eric, carrying around those $100 bills with him. But
that $100 bill is the tip of the iceberg.
If we have continued inflation, you're going to need $100 bills to pay your bills. Look, I don't understand why people don't get what Milton Friedman taught all of us 50 years ago, which that inflation is just too many dollars chasing too few goods. And Eric, correct me, you're the economist here, but if you've got the Fed putting out $600 billion, you know what? That causes higher prices.
Eric,
it's a squeeze on the middle class, big problem.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we heard today, Dennis Lockhart, the chairman of the Atlanta Fed, saying, you know what? If oil prices go to $150 a barrel, his solution, print more money, accommodate, ease more. These guys just don't get it. They need to stop.
That sounds like the 1970s, right?
Bernanke was going to hold back. No?
No, Bernanke's not going to hold back. He doesn't know how to hold back. Holding back now would mean raising interest rates and, from their perspective, crushing the U.S. economy. And they're terrified of the so-called Great Depression that could be caused. Look, these people are completely ignorant of what happens when you print money. And it doesn't always go into CPI, as Friedman taught us. Sometimes it goes into housing prices or into oil. It doesn't go equally, and therefore it's sometimes hidden, but there's massive inflation out there.
Got it. Steve Moore, Eric Bolling, Yaron Brook, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. President Obama's health care law hitting another roadblock today. Details from Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Next.